Let's get some business news for you now. Kate Moody's with us in the studio. And Kate, we're going to start with a global sell-off on stock markets as fears about the coronavirus spread.
Yeah, absolutely. It's becoming clear that the outbreak is far from contained, Laura. And the further it spreads, the more damaging the effect on regional and global economic growth and businesses around the world. Shares of airlines and travel companies and insurance firms among the hardest hit. Oil prices have dropped around 5%. Now, this was the opening bell on Wall Street. Since then, we've seen the Dow Jones briefly plunging over 1,000 points. It's the biggest one-day drop in over 2 years. It's erased its gains for the year to date. Chip makers are also firmly in the red. The tech sector as a whole is especially exposed to the slowdown in China, and the Nasdaq's down over 3.5% this hour. Italy's stock market saw its biggest one-day drop since 2016, down 5.5% in Milan, as the country became Europe's most affected. UK stocks, meanwhile, had their worst day in 5 years, while the DAX and CAC 40 each lost around 4%. Analysts say investors had been counting on a quick resolution to the outbreak, and fear has now set in.
Really on Friday, when we had a report suggesting that the US service sector had contracted, and previously the thought that the thought was that the United States, and indeed by that virtue Europe and many other parts of the world, would be impervious to the effects of the coronavirus. The standard thought process was that the effects would be concentrated in China, and that actually authorities would be able to get hold of the situation quite quickly, and the economy would sharply rebound from any discomfort that it had gone through. But now we're starting getting a sense from that US service sector data. It shows that Chinese tourism, the China influence in the supply chain throughout the processes throughout the Western world are already taking effect. And now with the spread of the virus, particularly in Italy, it's getting concerns worried in Europe, and hence you're seeing this downturn in equity markets that you can say now with the benefit of hindsight we're probably a bit too dismissive of the potential risks that this virus could bring to the global economy.
EU envoys have agreed a mandate for their Brexit negotiators, a text that will formally be adopted at a meeting on Tuesday. The British government will also publish its own guidelines on Tuesday, and official trade discussions are due to kick off next week. Both sides have ramped up their rhetoric in recent weeks, with French officials pushing for the UK to continue upholding European standards in exchange for market access to the EU. Two credit agencies have downgraded Lebanon's rating as its financial crisis deepens. Moody's and S&P Global Ratings both pushed the long-term foreign currency rating further into junk territory, with the latter saying a default is now, quote, virtually certain. The government owes some $1.2 billion in debt repayments in early March, and it may not be able to meet those obligations. The International Monetary Fund has been advising Beirut on how to deal with its public debt load, which currently stands at over 155% of GDP. That's among the highest levels in the world. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has received a warm welcome in India as he kicks off his first official visit. He's pledged to strengthen bilateral ties, although trade relations have been tense in recent years. Aaron Ogunki has the details.
Donald Trump and Narendra Modi both hailed each other's policies of prioritizing national economic interests above all else. But that shared view may also be the one that prevents the two from compromise. President Trump's America First policy and Prime Minister Modi's similar Make in India campaign have diminished the prospect of a trade deal between the U.S. and India. Though the U.S. president called Modi a tough negotiator on Monday, he nonetheless expressed optimism about reaching a deal.
We are in the early stages of discussion for an incredible trade agreement to reduce barriers of investment between the United States and India. And I am optimistic that working together, the Prime Minister and I can reach a fantastic deal that's good and even great for both of our countries.
The United States is one of India's most important trading partners, with bilateral trade hitting $142.6 billion in 2018. India is the United States' 12th largest goods export market. But trade tensions between the two countries have reached new heights since President Trump took office. Last June, Washington ramped up pressure on New Delhi by ending its preferential trade status, claiming India had failed to provide the U.S. with adequate access to its markets. India was the largest beneficiary of the program, which allowed $5.6 billion worth of its goods to enter the United States duty-free. Washington also slapped tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum. In response, India imposed its own retaliatory tariffs on 28 U.S. products, including almonds, apples, and walnuts.
All right, so we'll be watching the developments as that visit continues to see if any details do come out, Laura.
Kate, thank you very much indeed. Kate Moody with the business then.